announcements I would like to make. One is tomorrow afternoon, for any of y'all that are supposed to be here at 2 o'clock, we're going to be, but there's one vacant conflict, and that is that the 11th Congressional District DOT Board election is at 2 o'clock.
District 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock, sorry.
Unless I've got it wrong, on Thursday, January the 26th at 2 o'clock, 11th Congressional District.
It's on 4th Congressional District, I apologize, we got that.
And it may be meeting at some other place.
Yes, we're in the Senate chamber.
We've got to, in the Senate chambers at 2 o'clock, so I don't know how that may impact somebody, so we may be late getting started tomorrow because of that. If we are, I apologize. Also, if any of you in the audience have any material that we might need or any handouts or anything, if you will get them to any of us, the budget analysts or anybody, if you will, we'll try to make sure they get to where they're supposed to be. Our intentions have been to do the 2006-2007 budget together. However, Monday, I got my marching orders, I guess you can just go through it, is that we have got to have the 2006 budget recommendations to the Appropriations Committee put together this weekend, which put us on a short leash that we were not expecting. So if you don't mind, if you will just address the 2006, if there's anything in 2007 that you want to highlight, we're going to do, as much as I don't like doing them again, we're going to have to do them again to give you a fair opportunity in 2007, on the 2007 budget, to really be fair to the committee, fair to your agency, and so I apologize for that. We were told initially the first week of the session that we would have basically 10 more days for this. I will tell you what the schedule as far as the budget, the anticipated schedule for the budget is Wednesday, Tuesday, basically the House recommendation to the budget to the Appropriations Committee will be out on Tuesday. We'll be taking up on Wednesday, out in rules on Thursday, and on the House floor on Friday to vote on. So that's a week from this Friday. So that is the anticipated schedule to cross over to the Senate on Friday. That would be, I think, like February the 3rd or 4th, something like that. So if any of you have any questions on that, we'll try to answer them. Is there anybody in the audience that needs to go first out of order to make another meeting? We'll try to take care of you if it is. And I'll be glad to try to take care of anybody that's got a conflict that needs to be out.
Mr. Chairman, as you know, at 3:30 I have a public safety meeting.
I know you do, and along with that is Representative Chambers, and that's why I hate to lose those people. Is there anybody you'd like to hear from before you leave? Those. Well, we start at the bottom and go up. It doesn't matter. If post is prepared, unless somebody has, I'll put it to you this way, anybody in the audience wants to object, you can. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Glad to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Firstly, my presentation will be rather brief, but I want to thank this committee and the General Assembly. Last year in our FY06, you added money to add another investigator to our investigative staff at Post, primarily because of the case backlog that was building up to, we were 7 or 8 months behind in those caseloads, and with the number of law enforcement officers increasing substantially across the state, it was growing faster than our staff and our ability to properly investigate those cases and get them to the Post Council for due process hearings. In January of '05, we were able to, we had 31% of the cases were going to counsel for due process hearings within 4 months. In January '06, 54% of the cases were completed and moving to a counsel for due process hearing. Currently, we only have 52 cases that are over a year old. We opened 660 cases so far this year, and we currently have 436 open cases. Now, the significance of what I've been talking about is this. When allegations of improper conduct or misconduct are made against a law enforcement officer in this state, if there's probable cause, an investigation begins. And we think it's fair and right that that investigation be completed and that officer has a due process hearing within a reasonable length of time, and that's not left hanging out there for a long period of time over that law enforcement officer. If the case should be moved in a timely manner, it should be the council should have an opportunity to make a decision if sanctions are necessary, or in some cases clear that officer. By the way, I didn't tell you, we're on page 46, I think item 249. But I want to thank you, and I think it's my responsibility to tell you, report to you, that as a result of that additional appropriation for an investigator, what we've accomplished, and we're certainly moving into meeting our goals, is to get every case completed and moved before council for a due process hearing within a 4-month period. Also, we, because with an agreement between myself and the Commissioner of Corrections, Commissioner Donald, we moved a position from corrections to post-council. Now, that person, their job didn't change. They still do the same thing. We had a position that, for some reason, many years ago, was funded at corrections and actually did post investigations. We were in agreement that there was some potential for a lot of conflict of interest and problems with that. So that position moved, but it didn't change anything because that person in that position still handles those same cases. We are operating with a very, very tight budget. We're just under $100,000 short. We are encountering a problem related to 2 retirements of fairly long tenured employees. This creates a problem with the reimbursement for accumulated annual leave over a long period of time that we're required to pay out. It's roughly $40,000. Being a very small agency with 24 positions, it makes it very difficult for us to, even though we anticipate leaving those positions open for some period of time, we can't make up the cost of the reimbursing those retired employees for their accumulated leave time that they're entitled to pay for. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, that is basically my presentation. I'll be glad to respond to any questions that you may have. One occurred already this month, and the other will occur early February, when those people will actually leave their employment. Yes, sir. We're already deficient in trying to deal with the shortfall we have, and this only creates a bigger problem for us in shortfall in our 06 money. We're talking about $39,000. Yes, sir. we were already, before this, we got about almost $100,000 shortfall that we've got to try to make up somewhere, and then this $40,000 for the reimbursement for accumulated leave time that they're entitled. That's one of the shortage, but we're faced with trying to make up a shortfall of just under $100,000 too. Right. Oh, I will. Mm-hmm. All right, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I didn't even introduce myself. I'm Bill Hudson, Executive Director at Peace Officer Standards and Training, and our Budget and Support Services Director is Patrice Kerner. She's here with me.
No other questions? We will move on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We'll go back to the top of the list and to the GBI.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I see many great supporters of law enforcement here. I'm Vernon Keenan, the director of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and I think I'll be talking from page 38 on the tracking sheet as it relates to the GBI budget. But actually, in the supplemental budget 06, our main item here is to replace a boarder at GBI headquarters for $100,000. Our headquarters facility was built in 1985, and over the last few years we've had to go through some repairs, which are normal for a building that age. GBI headquarters operates 24/7. And our headquarters houses not only the command staff and administrative section, but also a large part of the GBI crime lab system for the state. And that is, we also, of course, all the agencies are asking for the increase in adjustment to the workman's compensation premiums, which are necessary by been a new increase in those charges levied against all the state agencies. Well, I got some stuff, and we have some items in FY07, but. No, sir. It is due for replacement, and we've been having problems with it. This originally had been, we had proposed putting it in a bond issuance, but the governor came back and said he wanted to put it in the supplemental.
Any questions? I've got one for you about that, if you don't mind. Is there any reason not to put it in the bond package? I
think that the way it was explained to me, it was such a small amount that they wanted to, yes, sir, and the funds were available in supplemental.
If we need some money, you wouldn't mind putting the bond in, would you?
Sir, I'd hate for the men and women to work in the cold and.
I know you.
Oh, sir, whatever, sir. All we need is the boiler. No, sir. And I don't care where the funding comes from for the new agents we need in FY07 either.
Any other comments or questions? Right. We appreciate you.
Sure. Thanks, sir.
Next is corrections.
I missed those tickets for the PGA this year.
I think somebody else.
Burn go.
We know everything.
Well, Mr. Chairman and other members, distinguished members of this committee, I feel honored to come up here today. I got my membership card back from the Sheriff's Association and the County Commissioners Association. Just by, well, I got them back. They were holding them hostage. You know, it's just like, y'all know I'm from Mississippi, and they had a friend down there named Jared Clower. He said, "Shoot up in the street. One of us needs some relief." Well, this budget provides a little relief, and I get my membership cards back. And that's where I think it's appropriate to begin, simply because the sheriffs and the counties have been bearing a great burden housing state inmates, and this budget gives us some relief. But as you ask, I'd like to introduce members of my team, Mr. Harris Hodges, who is the Director of Admin, and Ms. Lisa Urich, which y'all probably remember from other departments, has joined the team as our budget person. So they will be providing you with 3x5 cards and contact information. Before I get started, one of the unique idiosyncrasies of our budget is that we have over 81 different sub-programs, I think about 17 different programs. And as legislation is designed, we must ask Mother May I before we move things around. And so my budget presentation this afternoon is about things that make sense, but things nonetheless we are required to make requests for you all to endorse and support. One of the phenomenons that have happened is that we have had good success in managing our probation population with over 24 detention centers. However, as you notice, the inmate population continues to grow, and that's where the governor has targeted resources for the department to take on the inmate population. As the probation population has declined, what we are proposing to do in this budget in many situations is transfer missions of some of the detention center to pick up some of the inmate population where the need is. As we speak today, we are hovering around 0% probationers in county jails that have paper and need us to come pick them up. Now, there are probably some probationers in county jails that are going to be destined to be ours, but by law we can't pick them up until we get the paperwork, the sentence from the courts, and et cetera. On the other hand, we have somewhere around 2,800 or so inmates that have paper that we need to pick up. And then finally, we have about 4,700 people we think are destined to join us in the future as soon as the sentencing process is done. So as you look at your budget, you'll see that most of our information in the budget pertains to a term that we've come to live with as we adjust from probationers to inmates in some of our facilities, and that's realignment of mission. As in the case of West Central, sir, as we saw a spike in that facility, we were obliged to keep that rather than close it. That's a budget item that you see right up front in budget item number 82. We are deferring that decision. It is a PDC, one of those missions that we no longer need, but nonetheless we got a strategy that allows us to keep people in there for the time being so that we can open up inmate beds in some of the newer PDCs that we're opening. So we think that West Central there in your neighborhood is going to be settled for a while. You look at the other expenditures that we got there. Let me give you an example. House version of the bill you got shows item numbers 79, 84, 88, 90, 94, 97, 99, 101, 103, 110, and 113 all relate to realignment of funds from programs or sub-programs into programs where they are now needed. An example is item number 78, 83 and 109, for example, we have in our program and admin budget about $54 million. That takes care of most of the operations for specific functions such as IT, engineering services that y'all enjoy in your community, as well as the personnel, staff monies that are required. And while we may have, in this example, 78, we have housed the residential substance abuse money there initially in an admin program. Now that we're establishing our first probation residential substance degree program up in Arendelle, it's time to move that $201,000 from the admin budget up to Arendelle's budget. And that's what happens there. Same thing with Bainbridge. We've moved money out of an admin account over into the Bainbridge Substance Abuse Center. And that gives you an illustration. But you have in front of you a number of different transactions, and I would prefer, sir, perhaps if you would ask me, if this committee asked me specifically about any one of them that you would like me to talk to, and I'll be prepared to do that. Yes, I think that any question, Representative Bernard, would be okay at this point. I mean, all these budget items are important to us.
Just curious on the positions which are on, I guess, on 107, 108, and then also 106. Can you begin to name, for instance, the 918 additional beds, where those beds going to occur at?
Absolutely, and that's a great question. I mentioned it fairly rapidly in the joint meeting that we had. But we know that this budget will allow us to open Turner, PDC, and Turner County as a unit of a state prison that will house inmates there. In all circumstances, we're using these to house inmates. So Turner, Appleton, Wilkes, and Lamar. And the good news there's 48 new positions for people in those communities. We suspect that some of the population in existing prisons will decide to go there. We're hoping that a percentage of them will stay at home and not commute back and forth and give us a little bit of experience in those centers. Those are the 4 probation detention centers that we're going to operate as state prison units. 9, as I said earlier, was the $201,000 that we needed to move up to Arendelle in order to operate our first probation residential substance abuse treatment facility. It was in the admin account. What was the other number, sir? 108. Yes, even though we have no new space being created, what we have are day rooms that hold up anywhere from 10 to 18 people per. So what we're going to have to do now is buy the beds from Georgia Correctional Industries and set those beds up in the day rooms. Every one of our dorms generally has a day room. So we've calculated that we can get out of putting people in the day room those additional beds. Now, when I put them in there, I still got to pay for.
Is the day rooms the 918 or the 1348?
Okay.
1348 is 106.
And where are you at?
On page 24, where you say you're providing 1,348 temporary beds, are those the day spaces, or the 918 additional beds the day spaces?
Okay. Now you're talking. Let's see.
106 and 108.
One is operating. Okay, I'm sorry. Let me shift back to my other piece of paperwork here. Thank you, Lisa. Okay. Let me break it down for you. The 918 breaks down this way. Additional beds at Jackson Diagnostic of 178, at Lee Arendelle of 248, of Burris 300, of the HiMax at Jackson Diagnostic of 192. That takes care of that number. That gives you the 118. And the okay. We've talked about Appleton. That's item number 91 and 107. And in the 1300, we have 16 prisons, state prisons, day rooms that have been identified to put the additional beds in. That's where you get your day room beds.
At this time, you actually can't name those prisons.
16, we can get you that number. Do we have any names of those 16 prisons? Okay, here we go. Okay, we're getting Augusta State Medical Prison and Augusta get an additional 212 beds. Jackson Diagnostic 52. These are day room beds. Jackson Diagnostic permanent beds that were 126. Pulaski 100. Smith is getting 36. And I will make this available to this document available to the committee if you like. Macon 50. Hancock 100. Ware 48, Baldwin 280, Calhoun 100, Wilcox 54, Phillips 32, Johnson 100, Rutledge 20, Washington 100, Dooley 36, Lee State Prison 24, and Coastal 56. It gives you a grand total of 1348. Why don't I do this for you? I'm sure we have other copies. Yes, we are opening them up in priority by dates of construction, how long they have been left open. And Turner, Appleton, and Wilkes are the two first to go. We are hoping to open them as soon as possible, but there are some things we still have to do with all of them to get them ready.
How many correction officers are you short now?
We have 500 spaces that we are recruiting for. We were recruiting for that was within our lapse factor of 7%, but a total of about 1,400 if we had no lapse factor, if we were to recruit. But again, we have 10,000 correctional officers, so we're a very large organization. We have, with this budget, recently advised our wardens that they're no longer going to be constrained by the lapse factor. So we're hoping to be able to recruit aggressively.
Commissioner, is that compromising your safety in any of your prisons?
No. No. What happens is with the lapse factor, it will stretch our people. It will cause some of them to work overtime, and some will enjoy the overtime as an additional bonus to their check. But we are not unsafe at this time.
Also, Commissioner, and this may be a question that maybe, I don't know if you need to answer this or not. Where does Dalton and Dublin stand as far as...
Let me talk about Dalton and Dublin. That's a great question. Yeah. My colleague Dale Mann is over there with his big smile across his face because I think we've gotten consensus that we want to let him use that as a much in demand academy for county sheriffs. As you recall, the people that we would have put in Dalton and Dublin would have been those probationers, and we're just not, for some reason from the judges, getting the diversion center type inmate requirements anymore. We're meeting that demand. In fact, when I last looked, I believe we were like 64 empty beds in existing diversion centers. So we have a proposal that we might have Dalton used as an academy. You know, those beds are not your typical, as we would describe, hard beds. They were the diversion centers for probationers, and it was almost like a dormitory life. It lends themselves to the office and classroom space that a regional sheriff's academy might be suitable for. I think there is an interest also in Dublin for the same purpose, and I believe Dale will comment on whether or not he wants to pursue that one or not. I think there's some things that he still has to do on that one.
Well, after saying all that, how close are you to doing it? That's what we want to know.
Can I ask Dale, how close is he to?
If I can address it, Mr. Chairman, just from
That's
here,
what we do with you.
Yes, absolutely okay. In fact, the correction boards have already voted for Dalton to transfer that if we're asked.
Dale, if you don't mind, how about explain to the committee what we're talking about?
Sure.
They may not be aware of it.
sure, these two facilities are really ideal for us to put a regional police academy. A regional police academy will serve sometimes as many as 20 counties. It's the primary point where peace officers who are hired either by the sheriff's office, local police department, have to go to a 10-week basic training class. And Commissioner Donald and I have been talking for the last 4 months or so. There was one that was sitting, he is currently one sitting vacant in Dalton.
And they were built by corrections, right?
They were built by corrections. And it's sitting vacant. It's got 52 rooms in it. It's got adequate space for staff and for classrooms. And we'd like to be able to convert it. The Board of Public Safety at their last meeting voted to accept the property if it's offered in Dalton. And I believe February the 2nd is the next Corrections Board meeting. And I'm going to go to the Board of Corrections and ask them to give up that one and probably the one in Dublin, East Dublin.
What are you getting out of it?
Well, I'm getting the satisfaction that taxpayers' resources are being used in a way that supports the mission of public safety. As you know, the reason those buildings are there was Fortis money. Remember when the federal government was passing out money in the late 90s? Those facilities were built with that money, and as such,
There's no problem there.
no problem.
They use that.
I don't think there's a problem at all. We've looked at that. Our legal people have been looking at it. We've already basically agreed with Dale that he could use those facilities, and we saw no conflict there.
And Mr. Chairman, the last comment is that we'll go to the State Properties Commission, which the governor's the chair, and we'll complete that, assuming the State Properties Commission does not have a problem. Thank you, sir.
Commissioner, where are you, what's the status of the Eatonton facility that you closed last year, year before? Is that still in your inventory, or has that been turned over to state property?
Are you talking about Putman of Putman? Putman represents a unique challenge to us in that it has a very high cost to operate. When you begin to look at facilities, if you get one around 100 or so, the cost per inmate and putting staff in there, it just doesn't suggest that we should open that.
But what do you, I understand, Bill, and I know the company.
Sure.
Around closing it. What's your short-term, long-term plan for that facility? I mean, you're having to maintain it, I mean, you got it in inventory, don't you?
We have it in inventory, but we have,
That's actually been transferred back to the county last year.
okay, I stand corrected. My assistant commissioner advises me that we've transferred that back to the county last year.
It's already been transferred?
Already been transferred back to the county.
Okay, so it's in, that's what and that go through the properties commission? So it's been transferred back. Anything else? I have one other one. I mean, I hate to keep asking questions. Go ahead and I'll come back to that.
Commissioner, on the, let's see, item 95. We knew last year the budget was passed that y'all were being shorted on health services. And noted through the media this past year that y'all had some problems over there in the health services as far as management. Some of the directors, one or two, I'm not sure how many that have come and gone since then. Give us a little update on the status of health services to that.
Sure.
And some of the media this year was talking about the hepatitis problem in the state facility.
Sure. Well, we're not indifferent than any other large agencies. We've been put upon by the aging population, new treatment regimens, the cost of medicine, the chronically ill, hepatitis and HIV have been factors that have influenced several different populations like this. But the bottom line is we've looked at this and we've made a decision that much as we have in society, we have to change our processes. And what we've done in our department is begin that move to change processes. We find that there will be no change in the constitutional level of health care that we will give to prisoners. But we are, in some cases, in the one that you're talking about, consciously reducing our staff requirements. In one example, we had a staff of 26 folks inside my operation, central office, monitoring the health care processes. We also had a staff at Medical College of Georgia. We also had a staff at GCHC. We had a staff at MHM, all who were our contract partners, basically doing the same thing. As a cost-cutting measure, I've cut that staff in half. As people have left, some have been encouraged to leave as a cost-cutting measure. But we have hired a world-class medical director. She is board certified in 2 different states, but more importantly, she has a managed care background, and that's the direction we want to take to the department. For example, as we look at our department, we found that the pharmacy in South Carolina, there is only one pharmacy. We have 15 pharmacists, and this is all about processes. They have 7 pharmacists and pharmacist tech. We have 75. We have 31 different locations where we're doing mental health medicine. Mississippi has 3. We have 33 psychiatrists. South Carolina has 3.5. What I'm suggesting is that the enlightened direction we want to take the department in terms of managed care is to reorganize and look at the operation of the medical department along functional lines. And that is, we should consolidate some of our options where necessary. For the last 3 years, we've had to do a furlough. We've had to do a hiring freeze, all on the backs of other staff, simply because we've always come up short on the medical budget. So what we're trying to do is consolidate and realign. We're looking with a broad vision to the future. Managed care, you know, I mentioned the other day that some of the consultations, to me, from a pragmatic standpoint, can be done other ways or not done at all. We're using more telemedicine, over $1 million, $500,000 this past year, $1 million we are estimating in the coming year we're going to save in cost avoidance. But if you just consolidate pharmacies, as South Carolina has, and we have a process to do that. We're going to go to the plan is to go to 15, 12, 10, and eventually gets down to 6 over the next year. You can see that we can cut our costs and operating costs. You and I, for example, at least I can order my medicine online, and it comes to me the next day. There are all types of IT capabilities. The generic drugs, as an example, we're going to save resources by buying generic drugs. For some reason, we weren't exploiting all of the generic drugs out there. We're looking at a broader vision in the Milledgeville area, which we want to talk to Milledgeville about because it is geographically centered right now. We're having to drive from different directions all across the state to get to ASMP. We're hoping at some point we may have some improved capability in Middle Georgia that will cut down on the cost of moving people around in the system. So, through a combination of regionalizing pharmacies, to using more generic drugs, to consolidating some of the mental health, to getting control of the utilization management process, to telemedicine and stop being redundant in staff, and me setting the example. As I said to you all previously in the combined committee meeting, we have 82 positions in the central office that are not filled, and you can see how we went from 26 positions in the medical staff going down to 13, how we've saved taxpayers' money. It is a very logical process to me, and is being led by a medical professional who has great deal of experience in managing this type of process. Yes, sir.
Could you give a little bit of an idea, and I appreciate what you're saying, because I remember the year before last, we tried to make some suggestions to the department that, John Boyd, what's the company you folks represent?
MHM,
No, I'm talking about the private prisons, I'm sorry.
CCA.
CCA had a program a couple of years ago, and we
Sure.
were talking about that at that time, the way they were doing the drug disbursement.
Yeah. What we
Is this something that I can envision? That this
Yes. Actually, when we looked at ourselves from a medical standpoint, and even in the management of prisons, we probably have not exploited all the best practices that some of our private prisons are doing. Greater utilization of the generic drugs, as an example, the distribution of drugs, as an example, and in this budget, you will see that we have given CCA and Cornell a little bit more flexibility without undermining our standards for security. They are required to comply in accordance with ACA, American Corrections Association standards, but we're going to give them greater flexibility in using best practices. And yes, I do recall the discussion on pharmacy.
I might continue with that. And I understand, and I guess the point I'm trying to get to is in looking at that, some of the recommendations we'd made way back when was that maybe the department ought to consider contracting with someone like CCA, that if they were interested in doing the whole state system.
Sure.
Type of discoveries.
Yes.
What your new profession
Well, there's a twofold effort. The governor has embarked on a procurement implementation plan that will take a look at how we might leverage requirements such as pharmacies and other things across state agencies. But in the interim, what we are looking at is in-house, as I said, regionalizing our pharmaceutical costs and reducing the number of places we have to have pharmacists. Yes.
Can you tell me what will be the relationship? Is there still talk? Will be much of a continued relationship with the medical school of Georgia?
We hope to continue that relationship. We have a great partner in Dr. Ron in the Medical School of Georgia. However, I think we all should be not afraid at some point to have another contract RFP out there that competes the contract with other people who are in this profession, and we're hoping that we will be able to do that soon. Mississippi has CMS, I think Tennessee has PHS. There are a number of other people who might come to the table and compete for this contract. We've had this MCG contract for some time. They've been great partners, and they've taken us through some hard times. But it's probably not a bad idea that we do go forward at some later date and we look a little competition. But I really want to keep them in there because I think many of our processes in the past, as we've required them to do things, may have constrained even them in their flexibility to present us a good product.
Another question, if you don't mind. Have y'all made a projection? I scanned the 07 proposed budget, but do y'all have any projections as far as plans for future prison population or expectations, and any any plans on the drawing board?
Absolutely.
As far as the building of new facilities, or do we plan on letting it all catch back up with us?
No, absolutely not. One of the things we embarked on, as you know, sir, when I took over was a 20-year plan, looking at ourselves in the future. As a part of that process, you would remember Alan Adams. He's now on my staff as a strategic planner. He's engaged, even today as we speak, with the Rosser Corporation, who was selected in a competitive process as our long-range strategic planner, and they have a process that is ongoing involving everybody in Department of Corrections and other stakeholders in designing the prison requirements of the future. In our preliminary budget, we are looking at how the infrastructure at some of our prisons, for example, GSP in the Tattnall area, is decaying, and we need to replace it. And we have that process ongoing to determine what we can do with that. Additionally, we've had several private prisons have talked to us about their ability, and I'm glad you asked this question. It's something we will talk about later, perhaps. Their ability to build prisons for us without a bond package, but for the cost of what we're operating right now. And so that's extremely interesting to us, and as we try to minimize impact on resources in the future. But yes, we have a vision to, for example, build what we describe as hub facilities in the Milledgeville area, where we have 5 state prisons, 4 of which is on the campus of Old Central State, and some of it is people intensive in that it was dormitories, and dormitories don't necessarily make great places to secure inmates. And then the GSP facility there in L&M building probably is a tough place to have our not only inmates but our staff work in. And so there was a hub facility we're looking at for the Tattnall, and a couple of hub facilities for the large density of overworked facilities that are in the Baldwin County area. So yes, strategic planning is ongoing. Alan Adams and the Rosser Corporation are the leads, and we are having all stakeholders involved in that process to define what our requirements are for the future and ensure that the prisons we build are technically and IT as efficient as possible.
The two facilities that was previously mentioned, Dalton and East Dublin.
Mm-hmm.
How many bed spaces are those? Those are built as what, PDCs?
Diversion centers. And you remember the diversion center concept. I believe they were 100-bed facilities, soft beds as you recall. They're dormitory-type environments where in the past they were old restitution centers. The judges would put them in there and require them to work and pay back their restitution and let them out after that. But that that type of facility, we have several of those. As I said, it's not in high demand. We have 64 empty beds to fill our needs today. It was a diversion center, yes. But there is also a PDC in vicinity of Dublin. In the vicinity of Dublin, in Caldwell, I think PDC is what it's called.
Yeah, and what I was curious about, it's currently open. It has an inmate population.
Yes, yes. Yeah, what happened is as I introduced my opening remarks coming in, what we found is that we have an overabundance of empty beds in PDCs. We have 315 empty PDC beds, and last year we averaged over 400 empty PDCs. That's 2 PDC worth, and that's taxpayers' money that's already been used to purchase those beds, but they're empty because of the lack of demand for them. What we had proposed to do, as I said earlier, is to take a similar population, minimum and medium security inmates, similar population to the probationers, and just switch the mission and redistribute the existing population to facilities where we had empty beds, and we thought we'd be able to meet the requirements. That is an ongoing process. We explained that as part of the governor's bill. He approved that decision. However, we have not yet. We are reevaluating it. I came down and Mr. Porter and Ross Tollison and I had a conversation, and my staff is reevaluating it based on additional information they gave us. But that's why there was that interest in that facility.
So I just want to make sure I was a little confused. So the 100-bed buildings, what you're planning on transferring over and not the PD?
That's right. The 100 beds, yeah.
And then as far as the mission, you're still working on that. I understood some of the community was opposed to your parting those beds up.
Yeah.
And I would mention to you that, I'd like to have that.
You like to move that mission to Tadnall?
If they're really opposed to it.
Okay. Thank you. We'll.
Let me mention another thing too. What are you going to do if you start seeing probationers come back and use up all the bed space?
Well, that's the great flexibility we have in this program. You see, changing the mission doesn't change the staff. So nobody will lose their job in the PDC because they're basically the same type of population. So if for example, we need additional PDC beds, and we don't have as many requirements for prisons beds, and we can then just change the mission.
Let me go back. In all fairness to Dublin, if there is a mission that can, for lack of a better word, softer beds, I'm assuming you got inmates that fit that classification for the sake of that community.
Well, I tell you, Dublin has been a great partner. That community has been a great partner, and I still have to go back to and talk about it to my boss, but I heard the messages that were sent, and some were solid arguments, and we'd like to have a little bit more time to discuss what we do. But we still have to have a solution that protects taxpayers' money, and we're looking at a couple of options as alternatives right now. But I should not speak to that until I talk to my leadership.
I got one more. How many facilities does this leave not funded and open that you have constructed? You got Stewart there.
Stewart doesn't belong to us.
It's not open. I mean, it's built, but it's privately built, but it's not open.
But it's got some population. I think CCA has some population. I'm not sure. But we are aware of Stewart. CCA is a partner. We don't know what the future will bring, and we have our own Stewart if somehow we get overwhelmed with additional requirements.
Any other facilities that have been constructed?
Yes, we have a Valdosta facility. It was another diversion center that is built adjacent to Valdosta State Prison, and we're looking at only 100 beds. Again, as I don't want to misrepresent, they're soft beds. They're for diversion centers. The same restitution issue we had with Dalton and Dublin, we've offered that too, but we have. I don't think we have the same requirements in that part of the community, and Dale has taken an option on that one. We have Pelham, which we're trying to get open, hopefully in a month or two. Well, we had the funding in previous years. This year, we're looking for additional funds for that, yes.
How much will it take to open?
Not off the top of my head, but we're working with the governor's staff to figure out what we'll require.
It's not listed either in the 06 or 07 anymore by government recommendation.
I understand, but as we continue to look for options for beds, it's been recently pointed out that Pelham is a possibility since it's so close to Ultra State Prison.
What happens if you don't get the funding? I mean, does it go across the funding?
Well, we have $48 million to open new beds. One of the options we clearly have is to come back to you and ask you for some of that money, because new beds, can be new beds in Pelham too. The facility is built, the infrastructure is there. There's very minimum startup costs since Autry is there.
identified through the budget process which beds would be the new beds?
Yes, we have.
And Pelham's not included in that?
It is not included in the new beds, but as you recall, sir, we had the West Central beds that, and in your neighborhood that we were counting on for inmate beds.
What I'm trying to do is help you find the money to open Pelham.
Well, I think we have.
What would it take? You don't know what it would take.
I do not have that money number, but I can get that to you later. Yes. But we see an option, as I said, since we were not able to close West Central and use inmates, is possibly achieve that by using that as a funding source.
That's just a lateral.
Yes, sure. But I'm just being careful that we have a chance to talk to our leadership before we do this. This is an ongoing process.
I'm not trying to box you in. I'm just trying to get an answer.
Yeah.
Where when we sit down and try to make budget recommendations, even though the governor's made their recommendations, that we have a complete picture of what facilities you have, what cost projection it would be, where if there is any needs, that we might recommend back for the house to possibly redirect or reappropriate or to fund.
If you allow me to, we will discuss that with you at the 07 briefing that we'll do for you.
But there may be some money in the 06 is what
Yeah.
I was in.
Sure.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I'd like to follow up on that.
Go ahead.
That's a small, 100 bed?
That's 160 beds and expandable, I think, to about 180.
Okay. Because you're determining that smaller bed space is costing the state more than obviously going into a larger bed space.
Sure.
So it's keeping with the mission overall, but that does sound like it comes close to fitting that.
Yeah. Well, we have Autry State Prison that is really in close proximity, and it is premature to make a decision. Again, we're looking at it as a mission that can house state inmates, and you've actually caught us in a decision cycle for what we want to do with Pelham.
Any other? Thank you, Commissioner.
All right. Thank you.
We'll be back at that. Let's see, next, thank you, Martin DeWalt. Welcome, former colleague.
Hey,
Glad to see you.
good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you so much. I hope I'll be able to save you a little time. I don't have a big request here, but I always think it's important. The governor has recommended in the 2006 amended budget a total of $166,978. Let me just basically tell you how that breaks down. One, you all will recall that years ago, the legislature gave to the law department the responsibility for reviewing hospital acquisitions in this state. There is a cost inherent in conducting those reviews. A while back, we actually had the money put in our budget early on for the hospital acquisitions, and over the years we lost that, and so now whenever there's a hospital acquisition or multiple acquisitions, we have to come back to the legislature and request the money to conduct the reviews. So the basic amount of this money, $160,676,000, is simply for hospital acquisitions. We had two that have really already taken place in Greene County and Murray Medical. At the amount of, we incurred about $60,676, and we have that in outstanding bills that need to be paid. And then we have two others that are online that we are working on and hopefully will complete. One at St. Joseph's in Augusta, the other one at the Barrow Community Hospital for another $100,000. So basically that's the $60,676. The other $6,300 is just for funding an increase in the workers' comp premiums. It's a pretty simple request, Mr. Chairman. We ask you to support it.
Any questions? I got one. You haven't, there haven't been any acquisitions, though, that you have not completed or done what you needed to do based on funding, though, is it?
Well,
Or you're just trying to catch up?
we're trying to catch up, but we're actually working to complete the one in Barrow now. We've actually gone ahead. We've set the hearing date, but we haven't completed the hearing yet.
Would you mind explaining to the committee, because I think there may be some people on this committee that do not understand what you have to do in that process?
The years ago, and some of you will recall as I look around the room here, House Bill 600 that really put in place a process here in this state where the Office of the Attorney General would have to review hospital acquisitions. And I think there was some concern, back in those days about for-profit hospitals coming in and buying up and gobbling up not-for-profit hospitals around the state. And so there was a process put in place so that the Attorney General would have to review those acquisitions to make sure that we didn't lose the charitable purpose of those not-for-profit hospitals as they were being acquired either by a for-profit or a not-for-profit hospital. That responsibility was given to the Office of the Attorney General. There's a cost inherent in reviewing it, primarily the valuation process. We have to make sure that the acquisition cost of the hospital is appropriate. And so we actually engage a public hearing in the Office of the Attorney General. We hire experts to do the valuation process for us in these acquisitions. We give the communities time to come in and provide their input, and then ultimately we make a decision as to whether or not it's an appropriate acquisition. It's worked fine, but we know that there are costs inherent in it, and that's why we keep coming back to you now. Since we don't have that money in the budget anymore, we have to come back to you and get the money to reimburse for it.
We've always reimbursed.
And you've always...
It's not been a problem.
No, sir. That's not been a problem.
To the committee members and to the Attorney General, I just experienced, I had one of those hospitals that just went through this, Taft in Royston and Hart County. They own the Barrow Community Hospital. And in the days when House Bill 600 was passed, there was a panic at that time that seemed to ripple through the Capitol because the for-profits, it was rumored that they were going to try to be taking over all the not-for-profits. Well, the demise of the healthcare delivery system and the profitability of hospitals has pretty well taken that out of the picture now. Whether the provisions of 600 is needed now or not, I don't know. But I do want to compliment the Attorney General and his staff because my hospital is a personal note for this committee. They own this hospital and had lost several millions of dollars, as so many of the small rural hospitals are doing. And they had to unload that hospital and found a buyer for that hospital. And it had to be unloaded before December 31st. At least they were fixing to lose their bonded rating for the overall healthcare system. And I want to express my gratitude publicly to Attorney General Baker for how he and his attorneys expedited that in short notice through the month of November and December to expedite that, and basically has saved another hospital system that was the parent of this one that was dragging it down. But for that, I'd like for this committee to know how important this is. The funding formula, as y'all might remember or may not remember, the funding formula for this is that those hospitals that are in critical care has got to pay a $50,000 fee, processing fee. And the Attorney General, one of the problems that we were concerned over at the time was that his budget did not have that money to cover it. So it was basically on a wish and a promise that they took on this to do. But one of the things this committee should look at, and I would urge you to do so, one is to look whether 600 is still a needed bill or whether it needs to be critiqued. And if it is, then this funding formula, when these hospitals that are petitioning, that somehow that money can be expedited or dedicated or designated somehow to the AG's office so they can hire the experts to provide this testimony, because this is hospital situation, it's a short notice. Some of these folks have to unload and get out of it.
And we've literally got bills out there that need to be paid. We're waiting on the money, so your help would be much appreciated.
What's your comment on House Bill 600 as far as the liability? I mean, is it...
I think the original purpose of House Bill 600 is still a viable purpose here in this state. Yeah, as I stated earlier, the whole idea was to make sure as these acquisitions were taking place around Georgia that we didn't lose the charitable purpose of these not-for-profit hospitals. It was a viable purpose then, and it's a viable purpose today. And we don't have any say-so over a private sale of a private hospital. That's something that we don't need to be involved in. But, for these public hospitals, I think we do need to maintain some degree of oversight there.
Do you wish to comment, are there any questions about that before we move on? Do you wish to comment about your staffing problem, or do you want to wait and leave that up to us?
Whatever the chairman's desire is there, it's not a...
Let me tell you what I have done. I've asked House Research, and I have passed out, and I'll be glad to provide you with a copy of all of the, to pinpoint all the attorneys in the different agencies in the state, and what state agencies are employing them, what their titles are, and salary and so forth. And I have passed this out to the members today to look at, and if it's all right with you, I'll give you one.
Yes, sir, I'd appreciate that.
Talk to you in depth when we get to the 07 about your problems on retaining institutional knowledge, also of your commission.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I'll get you one of these to look at where you can comment on it if that's okay with you.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, that would be fine. I'd love to talk about that topic.
Any other questions? If not, we appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee.
Appreciate it. Next, Parks and Parole. Next.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm accompanied by Beth Oxford, Director of Parole, and Gary McElroy, that handles all the budget and finance matters. I'm sure that they'll be able to handle all the additional requests that you may have. And I was here for Commissioner Donald's presentation, and I'm not here to lobby for his budget, but let me just make some remarks related to it. There's a desperate need for more hard beds, and the request that the governor has made for additional bed space funding is desperately needed. We're finding commitments are up. They exceed the releases. We're finding the parolable population that we have to look at. It's getting more and more difficult to find those that we can look at and feel that they have a reasonable expectation of success. We've got more violent offenders. We've got more sex offenders. In 1995, we had parole decision authority over 95% of the population. And as a result of Senate Bill 441, the number that have been designated recidivists, the number on death row, and the lifer population, we're down to about 79% of the population that are even eligible for parole. And because of the number of violent offenders and sex offenders, those that we can look at and come to a conclusion that they have a reasonable expectation of success continues to go down. 06 amended budget request is the total is $647,185. I think it's on page 88 of your.
Page 45 of the tracking sheet, I think.
All right. Well, I must have a different document. But the vast majority of that just relates to regular operating and travel and mileage reimbursement cost. The only item Only other item is a request for an additional $300,000 for our to pay our Spectrum Health Services for the substance abuse outpatient services that they provide to our parolees. As you know, dealing with the substance abuse issues is key to what we do. Over 76% of the prison population have serious drug problems, and if we don't deal with those drug problems, their probability of success is minimal. We spend about $100,000 a month with Spectrum. This program came online. We signed the contract in September of 2004. It was really not funded for the entire year, and the additional $300,000 is just to really give us the 1 year, full year funding that we need. And that completes our request in the amended. As I said, the others relates to general regular operating for utilities, gas, travel, and mileage reimbursement.
Any questions for the director?
Doesn't look like y'all ain't getting a whole lot in extra money in this supplemental.
I think you're reading the same document that I've been reading.
Director, what did you request that you made? What is priority did you request that the government did?
Well, the big issue that we have is in the salary area. The governor has recently asked the merit system to do a study on the pay for state law enforcement officers, and the findings were that where the state is over 10% behind for comparable salaries. Now, and that's considering the salaries for GBI, the State Patrol, and the Parole Board, and our parole officers. Our parole officers' start salary is a little over $28,000. I think State Patrol's is about $32,000, and GBI's about $34,000. So not only is the state very much behind the comparables, but we're at the bottom of the barrel. We got about 42 vacancies right now. It's getting virtually impossible to find qualified applicants. We've had a turnover of we've had to hire 79 new officers this year because of the turnover, and the training cost for each of those new officers is about $21,000. To me, that is not good business to continue like we're going. Our officers have a very difficult job. They manage a very difficult population. Every offender that our officers deal with are convicted felons, and our officers made over 4,000 arrests last year, and they're knocked around a lot in the process, and it's just getting more and more difficult not only to find them and recruit them, but to keep them. A recent example, we sent out 100 notices from those that are on the merit system on the list for a position that we had in Athens. And out of that list, I think we had 10 responses. Only 5 showed up for an interview, and of that 5, only 1 met minimal qualifications. So the bottom line is, the future does not look good at all in terms of recruiting if something is not done, and is not done in a hurry. These men and women have very important jobs. They are key to public safety in this state. It's very difficult to make the decisions that we do with respect to who to parole, but those officers have the responsibility every day of dealing with those offenders, helping them transition back into the community and become law-abiding citizens. But from a public safety standpoint, more than that, to hold them responsible for their conditions of parole. All of our officers have 4-year college degrees, and it takes that kind of educational background to deal with the kind of myriad of problems that parolees parolees have. But this is an area that's is really going to have to be addressed in the near future. We're going to be in big trouble.
What does it cost you to get someone hired, trained, in place for, and at what point are you losing your employees? I mean, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years? Is there a breaking point in there anywhere?
Well, we're obviously losing those that don't have very much tenure, but we're losing them across the board.
Each of us get truckloads of paper every day to live. There is the Georgia budget and policy, almost top of we've got just a white paper that's out on state employment and the cost of turnover. And I flipped through a lot of this stuff, but I really paid attention to this one. It's really interesting as to what it's costing the state on non-retention of state employees. And I'll make each of the members a copy that shows the salary range and different things of each agency. So it's real interesting how we're not retaining.
What we asked for was sufficient funding for a 10% pay increase for our officers, and even at with a 10% increase, we would still be under the starting salary for the troopers, and significantly under it in comparison to the GBI agents, and we have the same educational requirements.
I'll get you a copy of that. He didn't. I have been furnished with a copy, and I will get each of the members a copy of it.
But I absolutely, I mean, just one follow-up statement. I absolutely know that the governor is very much aware of this, and our budget, in my budget presentation to him, when I laid out some of the statistics that I've talked to you about, he said basically, say no more. You've convinced me. It's an issue of determining what the priorities will be for the state.
Is the study that you had the same study that you were talking about earlier?
No.
Okay, can we get a copy of that as well for the members of the committee? I probably hear more than anything else right now from our parole, our state troopers, our GBI agents of the turnover. I mean, this is when it starts reaching down in rural areas, because that's where your stability has been, in my opinion, because there haven't been that many options. But I'm hearing it throughout our area of the state of the turnover rate. For a long time, people had the stability of state employment because the benefits were great, the retirement was great, the salaries were competitive, and we've lost that, I think, and we're going to lose more folks if we don't respond to it. And whether it's in a percentage increase or whether we start leveling the salary schedules different, we're fixing to hit. When you have the turnover in our area of the state, that means in the metro area, you've been having it. And, I mean, I probably hear that as much as anything from everybody that relies on these agencies, much less the families of the employees that are working there. So we really do need to make this priority and how we decide.
I talked about the danger elements of what our parole officers do, but one of the key things that they do is in the transition process. 49% of the parolees that we deal with had no job when they entered the prison system. And with the great work that our parole officers are doing, we have an 80% employment rate right now. And that's an 80% employment rate with a population that a very small percentage of them even have high school diplomas or GEDs. So they are doing a great job, and the job that they do has a direct relationship on public safety in this state, because every day that they are employed, their probability of reoffending goes down. I think it's about 1% a month.
But if we get a copy of that as well, both copies, so we can start sharing that with our folks, and then as a committee, let's look at what we can do to help.
10% would have required, I think it's $2,391,203. We are funded. I mean, we have 316 filled positions with 42 vacancies. With the formula that the governor has laid out on the pay raises, I think about more than half of our folks are going to fall under that market midpoint that will qualify above the 2%. Above the 2%. But I mean, you know what the cost of living, the actual cost of living rate, cost have been, and know that what is being recommended is really falling short of the need. But I realize the necessity to prioritize also.
I understand you'd say that about half your manpower will probably fall under that 2% or that mid-level.
Do you have the exact figure?
The 316 parole officers, 248 will be under the market midpoint and eligible.
So you got 248 that will get 4%.
Above between 2 and 4%.
So average is about 2.8%.
But more than 2%. 248 of the 316.
Average is 2 what?
Of 8.
What's the number? Starts.
28, 230, 28.5.
I was just curious with your turnover, where are your parole officers going? What's attracting them as an overall? Do you have an idea? Do you know where they're actually leaving you to go to?
They're leaving for other law enforcement jobs. They're leaving for the private sector. Beth, do you have the exact positions they've gone to? We do exit interviews on all of our employees, and I'm sorry I didn't prepare. But they're not going into great, they're not in great paying jobs, and they're not going to great paying jobs. It doesn't take very much to move them off the mark.
That would be interesting if you could do that.
My question was very much along the same lines. For a long time, Guard and Parole, State Patrol, GBI was the place for a woman. That was the career path for young people in law enforcement. And where I'm hearing is they're leaving all three of those to go back with our sheriff's offices and our police forces because of just the better benefits and package. I mean, the career goal of folks used to be to go with these state agencies, and now they're kind of trying to get somewhere else. And the road, in my opinion, has reversed. And I think that's a dangerous place to be. And we're a better state than that, and we've always treated our people better. Anyway, that's looking at the same package, but that's where I'm seeing our folks go.
The majority of the parolees, just because are in the metropolitan areas, and it's in those metropolitan areas that really skew the pay comparisons. We're looking at it and saying that we're 10% behind the comparable salaries statewide, but actually we've got more officers in this area, and the comparisons that should be used are the Gwinnett counties, the Cobb counties, those that are already starting their people out at $6,000 and $7,000 more than our officers, with educational supplements that are available. So we got a lot of work to do.
Follow-up question: does an officer in the metropolitan area with the same experience as an officer in the rural areas, are their pay scales the same at the same amount of time?
No, we did have, I think it was a 5% or 10% pay supplement up until a couple of years ago, and during the times that we had to make all the budget cuts, that was an area that we had to make the cut in. And it was getting more and more difficult to do that in a fair and equitable manner, because the metropolitan area just continues to expand, and the cost of living in places like Savannah and Macon and Augusta and Albany, all of those areas, the cost of living is going up.
I just noticed we was looking at the document that you sent out, just the local police department, like 35,000.
And most of those really go up fast. And a lot of our folks are going to, the state officers are going to federal jobs, and in 5 years they're making well over $75,000.
Anybody else have any questions?
Thank you.
You'll get us that information.
Thank you.
You want to go back to the training center?
Yes, sir. Thanks, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Richard Guerrero is with me as the budget guy. And the governor's recommended budget, I think, is on page 91 in your tracking book. You're on a different one, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you, sir. And basically, we have the increase in the governor's recommendation for workman's comp, and then we have increase in operating expense to upgrade burners, igniters, control panels at 8 regional burn buildings. And those are the 12 regional burn buildings. We're going to do it in 8, the 8 oldest ones. They're located throughout the state. Some of them came online at different times, and when they came online, the piping is different, the safety features are different, and it's a safety-related item more than anything else to get those done. And $75,000 is recommended, and I appreciate the governor putting that in 06. We actually asked for it in 07, but it is something we do need to go ahead and do if we can do it. Let me talk just for a second about something that Commissioner Donnell has already brought up and you already asked questions about. On May 31st, the governor signed an executive order transferring almost 10 acres of property in the Department of Juvenile Justice Youth Development Center in Athens, right across the street from the airport, to us. Commissioner Murray and I started working on that probably a year ago now, and it was a building that had been closed for about a year. It's about 18,000 square feet. Each one of these regional police academies, and there's 10 of them throughout the state. Then there's 4 departmental academies, Atlanta, DeKalb, Gwinnett, and Cobb. But each one of those 10 regional police academies, 7 of those are training center employees. And we started picking those up in 97. We picked up 3, then we picked up 1, then we picked up 3 more. Other than the 3 academies here in the metro area, which is Clayton, Fulton, and North Central, which are just contract to us. I don't hire the academy director. I don't hire the staff. Really don't have anything to do with day-to-day operation. What we do is we try to control those as best we can between us and Post with putting in the contract. They have to follow all the Post rules and so forth. But on May 31st, the governor signed the executive order to transfer that property in Athens to us and almost 10 acres of land. This year, we would have been paying $72,000 a year lease to a private individual leasing an 11,000 square foot building over in Bogart near the Georgia Square Mall. Beginning in 1st of June, we went in and through sweat equity, we're pretty much the Habitat for Humanity agency in state government. I used folks that we have working at the training center, Paul McPipkin and others, in our physical plan. I actually diverted them from their duties 2 or 3 days a week, sent them to Athens, and we let only a handful of contracts. I think the last number is $54,000 is all we spent to go in and renovate that building. We took out walls to take 3 small classrooms, make 2 large classrooms. We converted a break area that was in there, so we ended up with 4 nice classrooms and office space
in that building. Now, it's costing us a little bit more in utilities, not a lot, but we went again from 18,000 plus square feet, and we came from 11. That's turned into be a great facility for us. It's in a better place. If you get out on Lexington Highway in Athens, you don't have the traffic problems you have out in Bogart and so forth. Last month, the State Properties Commission allowed us to pick up 17 acres at the old State Patrol post on Dean Forest Road in Savannah. Now, that post, I think, Colonel, has been closed 4 years, 5 years, somewhere in that neighborhood. 4 years. It's been closed about 4 years. I sent folks down the first week in January. We've evaluated the patrol post building, and we're going to go in and gut it. It's freestanding. I've not asked for any more money to do this. Didn't ask for any more money to do the one in Athens. But it's going to probably take us 9 months or so, but we're going to renovate that building and move the Southeast Georgia Police Academy, which currently we rent space from Armstrong Atlantic over on their campus. And we pay about $77,000 a year as a lease to them. I intend to do the same thing in Savannah we did in Athens, is to get us a permanent home. The exciting thing for us is that in Savannah, we've got property that's just derelict. The neighbors complain about it. The weeds are grown up in it. We're going to turn that into something good. The most exciting part of that is we're going to combine police and fire training at the same place. There's a national incident management system that everybody, because of the presidential directive, is more excited about than they ever have been. We need to start police and fire training together from day one. We need to build that relationship, and that's what we intend to do. The facility in Dalton is about 20 miles north of where we currently are in Calhoun, Georgia. We're at Coosa Valley Tech, and we're renters there. And through no fault of their own, I had the conversation with President McDaniel before we moved in and told him of the not good history we had with the technical school in Macon. We were there about 20 years, and we ended up in 2 house trailers in the parking lot with no water connected to them. And we were able to work a deal with the Department of Agriculture, take the old Macon Seed and Feed building, and we converted it into an academy. We're in a little bit over halfway of a 10-year lease, $1 a year lease with them. That time's going to expire. If you take the facility in East Dublin, which is about 26,000 square feet, if we're able, and it's exactly the same floor plan as the one in Dalton, if we're able to take the facility in Dalton and the facility in East Dublin, we may have an opportunity here that we've never had before. These regional academies have grown up over 35 years with not a lot of money put into them. Basically, none of them owned a property. Nobody in the state other than the training center owns their own pistol range, which after 35 years is pretty much a shame. The facility in Dalton is about 10 acres, and the sheriff up there, Scott Chitwood, tells me that there's some land next door that the guy may give the state. He may give to us if we want it. Again, combining police and fire training together up there. My timing stinks because you're in the middle of when you need to know something about money. I'm in the middle of I don't even have the property yet. I think I can get it. I think it's going to work out. I've already talked to Rod Bolton at State Properties on both those 2 properties, and I think we're going to work it out, but my timing is going to stink to the point that State Property probably will not meet until you're gone. So what we may have to do is actually try to pick up the property, move in, set up classrooms, set up office space, and it's probably realistically going to be next year before I come to you and say, if we're really going to sleep deputy sheriffs and police officers in there, which is a real advantage to the local police chief and sheriff. Currently, they're paying about $2,000 a student out of their own pocket to sleep them in a motel and feed them if they're over 60 miles away. If we come up with live-in academies, which is what the State Patrols had forever, what the GBIs had forever, if we come in with live-in academies, we can have more teaching time with students, and we can really mold a better product before we get them out of there. And I'm hoping the facility in Dalton and the facility in East Dublin will give us a chance to see if we can make that work. But I'm going to probably come back to you next year and ask you for the money to put in beds. Now, those rooms, now the commissioner might have been able to put 100 in there. I don't think I can put 100 police officers in there. Now, I guess diversion center folks are smaller than police officers are, but these are I've been to all three of those facilities, including the one in Valdosta. The rooms are very small. There's a bathroom in between with a shower and a toilet and a sink. And, for example, none of the doors have locks on them. So, I mean, there's some things we would have to do to get ready, but I really would appreciate your considerable support to get those properties transferred to us, because they're just sitting there right now. And I think it's consistent with a new Georgia, and I think it's consistent with good common sense to put those properties to work. And I'd be glad to yield and answer any questions.
Let me just mention our community is real supportive of what you're
Thank you, sir.
of the effort there and anything we can do. And I like the committee for chairman. I've talked about it and talked with Representative Harvey as well. It would be a great thing for our region. We have the fire center already.
Right.
In Camden.
Yes, sir.
It would complement a lot there.
Well, we're ready to do it. Thanks, sir.
Want me to go forward? Well, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, I certainly appreciate the opportunity to come before you today to talk for a few minutes about our supplemental 06 budget. As I was sitting back there watching the proceedings, I thought mine was going to be pretty rapid, and I'd only have 3 items here, but I solicited some more information here as I see where the line of questioning may be going. First off, I'd like to say thanks on behalf of all the men and women of the Department of Public Safety for an initiative that I believe began here last year. That was that we received a second 50-person trooper school that we weren't initially scheduled to have, and I believe that that was born out of the proceedings, and we certainly appreciate that. This year on the 06 supplemental, as I said, we only had 3 items. The first one is $190,000, which is the to reflect the adjustment in workers' compensation premiums. The second one is $30,000, which is a transfer of a, I'm sorry, page 46 of the supplemental. The second one is $30,000 in personal services, which is a transfer of a position to the Department of Revenue as part of the reorganization of the Department of Motor Vehicle Safety. What transpired there was we took on 270 new vehicles when we took on the department, what was the law enforcement arm of the Department of Motor Vehicle Safety. We have 7 people that work in our garage, and we didn't get any support personnel there during the during some of the meetings that occurred when we were trying to decide who was going to get what. The Department of Revenue got some of the department, but he had one position that was a warehouse position that he had no need for in the Department of Revenue, so he graciously gave us that in the $30,000 that would fund it. And the last item is $1,478,292 for 70 additional patrol vehicles to replace those that have over 135,000 miles. That not only occurs in the state patrol fleet, but that occurs in the motor carrier compliance fleet. We took on those new vehicles for them, over 270, and we came to find out that their fleet was very aging too. So I appreciate whatever consideration you could give on those matters. Mr. Powell.
I'd like to ask a question.
Sure.
About the salary, echo the claim of thought that you've already heard. Every year I've been here and I've gone through several sessions where we did the split pay raises and such as that. All that over that period of time, yes, I understand the need for education for us to stay in competition with the teachers and administrators. But I've always had a real problem about giving one set of state employees one pay raise and others another. It costs just as much for troopers or parole officers or GBIs. It costs just as much for them to feed their families. I think, and it was pleasing to me to hear some of the train of thoughts from some of the committee members a while ago. We don't have a clue what can be done about it, but how far down do y'all see internally y'all's, I'm sure y'all do exit polls with a lot of the troopers. I know a lot of the troopers that are leaving. Back a few years ago, we tried to do a step in there for that classification of troopers. But we've got a lot of troopers. I'm hearing a lot of them on a weekly basis. I've been connected to for years. They're bailing out. They're going to sheriff's departments where they can make more money, be a deputy sheriff than they can a trooper. And it just appears to me that this is taking a toll in the morale of the #1 uniform law enforcement agency in this state. What do you think it would take? 2-4 is ongoing right now. What do you think?
You know, and not just in our agency, I think the key to this whole thing with respect to the pay is that about 10 years ago, we did away with incremental pay system. That is that you got hired and the teachers still have it. They get hired at one level. I've got my oldest child's a school teacher, and my second child was trained as a school teacher, but it's a state employee, and I hear them interact back and forth on a regular basis. But that incremental pay system went away for us, and essentially what happened was every year for about 7 years, you got a 5% increase so long as you got a satisfactory report of performance. Then they skipped 2 years, 2 years, 2 years, and 2 years. So you actually got about 5% pay raises over the course of your career if you didn't get a promotion. Now what happens is you get hired, and our pay is $31,000, not $32,000 as was indicated before, but you stay there. Unless you get a promotion, all you get is whatever cost of living raise that we get every year. We're very competitive across the Southeast in salaries for other state law enforcement agencies. But I was just looking at one from North Carolina this morning. They start off at about the same as we do. In 6 or 7 years, they've gone up about $16,000 or $17,000, where ours have gone up about $2,000. And that's the sticking point. And we're losing our college-educated people to the federal agencies. I recently had an experience with a young man who'd been with us for 14 years and was a good employee, a very good employee. He left and went to a local agency where he got a $5,000 a year pay raise to start. He got a guarantee of $5,000 more in 18 months. They bought 5 years of his retirement, and he was able to vest his state retirement for 14 years, so he can retire 1 year sooner with a new agency than he could if he stayed with us. Plus, he's going to get the retirement that he'd already built in the state. And you really don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure that out. What was kind of embarrassing to me is about 2 months later we had our annual awards ceremony, and they identified the people across the state that had performed exceptionally well, and he came back in his uniform from his new agency to receive his award. And you know, that's really a hindrance to good morale in the organization. But we had one last week that quit. It's gone to the New York State Police. He went from $32,000 a year on the Georgia State Patrol to $59,000 a year as a new recruit in the New York State Police. And you know, there are a lot of opportunities out there. One of the differences, I think, with our agency is that you know, we don't work in an office. We don't do investigations. We're out on the road. It's confrontational just about every day. We've lost 25 people. 25 of our people through our 69-year history have lost their lives in the performance of their duty. And I think that's probably higher than any agency except the Department of Transportation, and they lose them pretty routinely to people working in the roads. But in addition to that, we've had many others that have been stabbed, shot. Routinely, we have about 10 to 20 people that are out on sick leave for injuries they sustained in the line of duty. So it is a tough job, and it wears on people. The highest retirement they can get now is 68%. Many of the other agencies, and I've got statistical data for comparisons against us to local agencies in Georgia, us against the Southeast, and us against the entire United States for state police agencies. In addition to that, and what I was unaware, and we took on the motor carrier compliance people, we thought we were somewhat underpaid, but in the merit system scale, we were 12% under comparative agencies, and they were 22%. So they're much further. They start off at $25,000 a year. They They wear uniforms. They stop trucks. They deal primarily in commercial vehicles, but they still have a fairly comparative job. So. And we're behind in communications officers.
They're both certified also.
Oh, they are. Yeah. Now, communications officers aren't. But the problem we run into with them is that when we lose a communications officer, and we just can't hire them anymore, they're all going to the 911 centers. And I just saw an advertisement today for a communications officer in a county I think would be considered outside the metro area now, but it's in fairly close proximity. And we started them off at 19 or 20,000. The starting pay for them is 29, which is almost equivalent to what a trooper makes. And it's just hard to retain trooper. We've lowered our standards. We used to require 2 years of college, 2 years as a communications officer, or 5 years sworn law enforcement experience, a post-certified experience with another agency. Now it's a high school education or its equivalent. The only thing we haven't lowered is the integrity issues, and that's probably where we lose most of our people in the process. But as I said, we had 2 50-person trooper schools last year, and the first time in the history of the Georgia State Patrol, we could not attract 50 candidates in either one. We got 36 in the first school and 35 in the second school. Both schools now, the first school will graduate in March. They have 25 left. The second school is only 25 days in, and we have 25 left there. So out of those 100 positions, we only get 50 at best, and I'm sure we're going to lose some more in the second one.
Any other questions?
Y'all inherited last year with the breakup DMVS. Y'all inherited compliance division. How many officers are they transferred? Or how many are still there?
They're authorized 378. We've lost 13 since they've come over to us in 6 months. We haven't been able to replace one of them. We're actively recruiting. Most of those are to retirements. We did lose 2 of them that are in the next trooper school.
Is all of that working out pretty good?
Well, I think it is.
Well, let me rephrase that. How is the chain of command that Colonel Mark McLeod, he was over that?
Right.
I'm not sure. He's not a colonel now. What is his title?
He's the chief law enforcement officer for the Motor Carrier Compliance Division. He's the same.
Then you've got a liaison between that division and the department.
I'm obviously the commissioner, and I'm first in line. Colonel White is the deputy commissioner. He's second in line. And then Chief McLeod reports directly to him, as does the chief of the Capitol Police and the commanding officer of Georgia State Patrol Division.
Y'all see I know that years ago, North Carolina had somewhat of a similar situation, and I think they did a transition program to those compliance officers they had were basically raised credentials. Those who wished could transfer or basically evolve into being troopers. Y'all had any?
We've offered all of them the opportunity to go to trooper school. 2 people have decided that's the route that they want to take. Trooper school is 31 weeks. It's very difficult academically, physically, and psychologically. And I think a lot of them are biding their time and patience and trying to see where they want to head. But I would wish that they all went, but we've never had a trooper on the Georgia State Patrol that has never attended trooper school.
I guess we probably just, when it just gets down to it, it's all about the money. Why would someone want to put themselves through 31 weeks for only $8 matters?
Well,
Even if it's an increase to a lot of them.
it's a $6,000 pay increase, but it's a difficult school, and some of those people are up in age now. Part of our problem, I think, is generational, and I kind of hate to go there, but the young people today don't seem to want to just put in the time. They're less willing to accept supervision in the academy, and if somebody tells them to do something or they become involved in strenuous physical activity, they walk out the door and go home, and that's their option. One of the guys in this trooper school came out of the Motor Carrier Compliance Division that's 50 years old, and he's probably the most aggressive person we have in there and is doing as well as anybody else. We had a master sergeant from the Marine Corps in the last school that was 46 years old, and he'd retired, and he did a great job for us. But some of the younger people have been raised a little differently in this day and time, as we're all aware. As I said, my two oldest children were school teachers by trade. One of them's on the state patrol now, but the school environment and just about every environment we find ourselves in government dealing with are having trouble with some of the people that have come along and been sheltered perhaps more than we were, and I don't think they've developed a work ethic. You know, most all of us, most of you are in somewhere near my age group, and we all worked as youngsters, worked on the farm or had some kind of job or did something and had a work ethic. And in fact, most of the people in my generation on the state patrol were military people. The Vietnam War was on, and we got a lot of people out. And I didn't say that in my budget presentation the other day, but we thought about it. And the governor said in his State of the State address, he wanted to make sure that all the people that came back from the 48th Brigade in the military in its entirety had jobs. And we certainly would relish the thought of many of those people that meet the qualifications take a look at what we do. We feel like they have the training and experience and the psychological background to do our work, and that's for years where we've drawn a great majority of our people.
Any other questions, Richard? Before I represent the bird, I just want to make a comment back to that left field. I'm not sure that's a plus.
That's a unique case. He's originally from New York. He was stationed down here in the military, and he put in about 3 years, and he decided to go home.
So he was a Yankee. So he was actually a Yankee who
Yeah.
thought was a damn Yankee who turned back.
I probably ought not comment on that. But.
I had a question about your command posts. A lot of them are getting old. I guess at the time, the one in Athens was a state-of-the-art facility that was built, but now it's coming along with you're talking about the new officers that you're trying to recruit and all the facilities. And even though they're out on the road a lot, they do come in to do their reports and other things. Are there any plans to update anything?
Well, that's kind of a unique situation too. Back in 1937, when our agency was formed, it was even in the statute it says that it was to be a non-political agency to provide traffic safety for the citizens of this state. And to try and, I think there were some issues at the time about was traffic law enforcement about money, or was it about safety? And the legislature, in their wisdom at that time, decided that none of the money would come back to the state. All the money for enforcement in this state that we do goes into the cities or counties where we work. In turn, what has happened is there's been an unwritten gentleman's agreement that they would provide the facilities, and in many cases they have done that. They just built a new one in Mr. Porter's district. They built one in my district. We had about 5 come online last year. We had 2 open up last week, and we've got 5 or 6 more in the plans. But I worry about some of them in certain areas where the local government don't have the ability to fund them. We've got posts in Donaldsonville, Americus, Washington, Swainsboro that have been in existence for 50 years, Helena, and then never been improved because they're in poor areas without the funding. And the state has never put any money that I'm aware of into any state patrol post except the one at Jekyll Island. And that's a state-owned island. We're actually the state police down there, and we take care of all calls, and they funded that.
Is that customary around the country?
No. Most states, I think the money goes into the state, and the state provide the buildings, just like the GBI. The state builds the GBI facilities. But
Does the state do that with any other agency?
no, not that I'm aware of. But that's been ongoing since 1937.
But no, for that, the SCOA post that was supposed to be moving up into Habersham County 12 miles up, I understand they've had a little bit of a change of direction. That maybe the Habersham County folks decided maybe we didn't have enough money to do it. Is that correct?
I'm not certain about that one. I'd heard some talk about it, but I hadn't been directly involved in it. And you know, we find it very detrimental to good working relationships. Sometimes when one county can't build one, other counties in close proximity start bidding and they'll provide the money if we move them over there, and that's not good to good working conditions with us. I mean, we would. I think they were originally designed in the bigger counties and with counties that had the funding, and they were centrally located. But in recent times, some counties have refused to build new ones. Some of them that had the money, and the adjoining counties have kicked the money in, so they've moved over, and it really has hurt some relationships with us.
Representative Bernard. Mr. Chairman. Colonel, on the 70 vehicles that you're going to replace with a little over 135,000 miles, how do you continue to use those 70 vehicles or do you auction them off? What do you have to do with
We turn them into the Department of Administrative Services now. On a general rule of thumb, now, those who for those that are just worn out, now some of those vehicles have been wrecked and haven't been replaced. For those who that are wrecked and they're pretty much unserviceable, unrepairable, we keep those and we cannibalize them. We take parts off of them and we put them on other cars that need them. If we bend a fender or something, instead of paying $1,000 to put a new fender on there, our people take a wrench to it and they take a fender off the wreck one and put it back on in an effort to save money. It runs up our car count some, and I've had to explain this 4 or 5 times, but we just think it's good business.
You do that yourself in a departmental?
Right, right.
Colonel, we tried to last year. I personally would like to see if there's some way maybe this committee could make it out to headquarters before we go to those stuff for the ones that haven't been out there. It's sort of an out. The other thing too, to the committee, we are going to try sometime as soon as we get the AC budget put together. We are going to have a hearing on one day here to do nothing but, and we're going to get with the agency heads to look at the pay for all of law enforcement. Now, I don't know that we're going to be able to help you, but I have been approached by a lot of members that are not members of this subcommittee, and some of them that are non-appropriations that would like to sit through a hearing and see if the legislature can send back, and I say send back to the governor, I don't necessarily mean send back to the governor, but to try to figure out how to address the erosion of law enforcement and especially the salary situation in the state. So, but if you could help us see if there's, even if it's one morning at 8 o'clock, and somebody, if you could miss rules, just to run out to headquarters, y'all wouldn't mind.
You're welcome any time, and I could talk to it for just a minute, but I don't know that. Yeah, you would. It's much more an eye opener if you actually see it.
Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Thank you, sir.
Well, Mr. Murray, we made you laugh, didn't we? I'm sorry. That's okay. The way the straws were drawn.
Somebody has to be last.
That's right. We appreciate your patience with us.
Mr. Chairman, I hope we have one more at least, right?
Oh, okay.
Firefighter standards of training.
Well,
and I don't mind being last.
no, maybe I misunderstood something. Come on. Commissioner, I'll tell you then.
Okay. So Albert, I'm sorry, I want to stay around. He's got somebody, his my vote or anything over there. Right. You're just damn naked. You
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that my presentation may be brief unless there are questions. I do want to acknowledge my staff, which you'd asked us to do early. Most of you know Jeff Miner, who is the Deputy Commissioner of Administration, formerly the agent's budget director. Diane Bell is now our budget director, who joined us last year. Any information that you need in follow-up to this presentation certainly can be provided by my office or by either one of those two individuals. I appreciate the opportunity to present our amended 06 budget, Mr. Chairman. Again, I know it's been a long afternoon, and again, someone has to go at the end of the presentation. That's not a problem to me. I look forward later to presenting our 07 budget. If I could direct your attention to page 39 of your tracking document, you'll see just a few 06 items for juvenile justice. Item number 196 has to do with increased funds to reflect an adjustment in the workers' compensation premiums. I think you all understand that. Unless there are questions about it, I won't comment further on it. The next four items, items number 197, 98, 99, and 200, if you'll notice, they all read the same because they are the same. It has to do with shifting money between programs. Our contract inflation funds were received last year, but all the funds were placed in one program and should have been spread around. So it's the agency's move to do that. This also moves some funds and positions between programs to start the transition of maintenance to state operations. At the joint presentation, you may recall I talked about our desire to move away from our contract maintenance, which the department has been involved in for a number of years. We have reached a point to where we believe that we can provide sufficient maintenance services to our facilities as a state-operated function as opposed to the contract. And we need to begin that process with our 06 budget. So those four line items, again, are all the same. They were broken out on your tracking document for reasons, I'm sure, but it has to do with moving those monies between programs. This has zero fund impact.
Really, all it takes was just a yes on it, isn't it?
Yes, that's what that's.
The old way, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the old way, it takes a yes.
Yes.
I didn't misunderstand that. That's what I'm asking.
It's actually it's that way in the.
That's really all that I have, Mr. Chairman. No, that's exactly what we're doing. In fact, yes, is what I have on my sheet. Fortunate and good timing. Diane Bell certainly was serving the Department of Correction well, but we needed a good budget director, and we were just fortunate. I'm delighted to have her on board with us. Thank you. I agree. Thank all of you.
Actually, I'm talking,
Are you? No, that's all right.
I'm really talking to Senate.
No, we're talking to Senate.
Right, that's fine. Thank you very much, Dr. Anderson.
I left out the firefighter stand. I'm training him.
Good afternoon. I'm Lynn Pardue, Director of Firefighter Standards and Training. And I did want just an opportunity to discuss with you our supplemental 06 money. We're on page 46 of your guide. And we're listed under as an attached agency with DPS. And basically, I'm just here for you guys to say yes. And well, then I'll talk a little bit longer, sir.
I do have a funding request for 07 that I have not given to anybody yet.
Yes, sir.
To my knowledge, all we need to do is basically just agree with the government what you want us to do.
Yes, sir. That's exactly right.
Anybody got any questions about that? We're going to try to, I can't promise you this, but we're going to try to hit you again because I will, this is one agency that has sort of been, I don't know if you want to say overlooked, stepped on, or forgotten in the training, throughout the training centers. And it's not the training center's fault, it's just happened the way the budget has been done in the past. And we were able to help them just a little bit last year.
Yes, sir.
If we can help them a little bit more this year to try to get caught back up
We,
$18,000, isn't that right?
that is correct for FY07. And we certainly appreciate your help last year. You guys allowed us to have $50,000 for per diem supplemental money. And it kind of confused us. I don't know if it was something I did or maybe someone I should have called, but it wasn't annualized into our budget. So we came back into FY06 with $2,598. So we would like to request that that be annualized.
Right, that's going to be a carryover from those. I mean, that is a problem that they did run into, was somehow we didn't get it annualized.
Right.
I was somewhat surprised about that.
But we certainly appreciate your help, and I'll be glad to answer any questions, and we would appreciate a yes.
Well, we appreciate it.
Thank
Sorry
you.
to kept so
That's
long.
quite all right.
See you, Chief. You need something, Paul?
All right, thank
Besides
y'all.
money. Besides money.
Besides money?
Besides money.
Did he say the site's money?
Besides money.
That's what we're gonna get here.
How you been? Good.
Are you smiling right through the whole thing?